I directly threw my vacation application on my boss's desk. The personnel department said you didn't approve it. The boss was indifferent. What kind of leave requires 42 days? I was even colder than him. Maternity leave. When I threw my vacation application on the boss's desk, he was still in a video conference. He made a pause gesture to the camera, muted and turned off the camera, and then looked up at me from the pile of documents. What's the matter? I pointed to the 2 words rejected on the leave slip and said, the personnel department said you didn't approve it. The boss leaned back in his chair, put his hands on his legs, and frowned slightly. You know that the competition for positions is very fierce now, right? Byron from Team B has been eyeing your position for a long time. I didn't say anything. He looked at me for a while and continued. If you leave your position for 42 days and come back, you may be transferred out, demoted, and lose your current position. I still didn't say anything. He seemed a little disappointed. What's the reason? A 42-day paid leave can't be approved just like that. I took out the medical record book from the folder and then spoke. Maternity leave. The boss looked at the medical record book and ultrasound report I handed over, and his frown deepened. The boss approved the leave. Before I left, he seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. I went back to my workstation to pack up my things. Xiao Zhang from Team A looked at me timidly. Sister, are you really leaving? I had no expression. Well, I may be sent to a subsidiary company or may jump to the opposite side. Xiao Zhang swallowed and glanced outside the door. Byron was standing at the door. Her exquisite makeup was filled with anger. Are you crazy? Really ruining yourself for a man? How hard it was for us to get here. How many times more effort did you put in than your male counterparts of the same batch? And now you give it all up for a man? A 42-day maternity leave is the treatment for a miscarriage at 4 months of pregnancy, just after the surgery. I can only get out of bed now relying on my workaholic spirit. I smiled at her. Take over the project I'm working on. I don't trust others. Byron was extremely angry. But I don't plan to stay here anymore. 4 months ago, I still planned to stay here until retirement and was calculating which nursing home I could go to with my enterprise annuity after retirement. Until I found out I was pregnant, while my boyfriend changed his number. When I sent him WeChat messages, he would only reply about work-related matters. After my best friend accompanied me through the entire surgery, she looked more like the one who had the surgery than me. Her face was pale and her eyes were red. She advised me, let it go. Then let it go. When I left, the boss's car was parked in front of the company. The car window was rolled down, revealing his cold profile. He didn't look at me. I'll give you a ride. I turned and walked towards the car behind him. My best friend asked her cousin to pick me up. No need. The child has nothing to do with you. 4 months ago, there was a connection. If the boss hadn't had a car accident and hadn't just forgotten me, and unilaterally thinking that he wouldn't be with me and canceling the wedding arrangements, I called the guests one by one to notify them, packed the invitations and gave them to the recycling station, and packed my things from the wedding house back to the house I bought myself. After that, the child had nothing to do with him. I know my best friend's cousin. He was a top student in high school who was 1 grade above me. He always occupied the first place. I would write his exam papers every time after he took them. I was always 20-25 points lower than him every time. In college, we were in the same school. He was the favorite of the professors. Every teacher who had taught him would take him as a textbook. The only intersection between us was that when I took the college entrance examination 1 year ahead and my sophomore year, he was the top scorer. I was 100 places lower than him. At his top scorer banquet, I went to attend. He was very comfortable among the group of elders, chatting and laughing, and cleverly taking care of everyone's smiles. At that time, I knew that people with high IQs can also have high EQs. And I am an ordinary person who still listens to English learning with headphones while attending a banquet. He was driving in the front. He didn't mind me going to the back seat. He bypassed the boss's car and drove towards the hospital. It's quite ridiculous. I actually found out I was pregnant on the day of miscarriage. The chance of miscarriage at 4 months is relatively small, but the danger is very high. That day, Cason took me to a conference dinner. He brought a female companion and introduced with a smile. Girlfriend. He patiently explained to others that he and I had broken up and cancelled the wedding. I was constantly working for the project. I hadn't slept for more than 24 hours. I was only hanging on by a bowl of soup at the dinner. On the side, I received the complicated sympathy and pity from others. After all, before Cason had the accident, he almost wanted to tell everyone that we were engaged. The wedding banquet notifications were made by him one by one. The invitations were designed by him personally. The materials, colors, and wedding candies. My veil, wedding dress, wedding shoes, and wedding venue, he designed for weddings. He personally checked every detail of the banquet. He also had to take care of the operation of the company. After work every day, he would wait for me to recharge and say, "Baby, I'm not tired at all. I'm so happy just thinking about getting married to you. It's like a dream." Everyone in the circle sighed that I was the one who pulled Cason down from the altar. But when I heard about his accident, I returned home overnight and rushed to the hospital room in a hurry. Seeing his indifferent eyes, the coldness that kept people thousands of miles away, and the sight of looking at me without a ripple. "I heard that you are my fiancé, but I don't remember. Sorry for delaying you for so long." I almost fainted from crying in front of his bed. I didn't cry because he didn't remember me. Instead, I was glad that he survived. At the accident scene, his chance of survival was very low. I knew that he had made great efforts to see me alive. So it didn't matter if he didn't remember me. It didn't matter if the engagement was cancelled. He was affected by the family drama of fighting for family property. During college, he started a business with me in a 30 square meter rental house. We ate 5 yuan noodles for all 3 meals a day. What hardships haven't we endured together? So it really didn't matter if he didn't remember me and canceled the engagement. But he couldn't love someone else. He shouldn't. After Alonso sent me to the hospital, he ran around for me. From physical checkups to seeing a psychologist. He took care of everything. After coming out, I smiled at him. "Alonso, thank you." He helped me re-tie my hair. "After all, I'm poaching you. How can I not be attentive?" I was smiling. When I came out of the hospital, the sunlight at 2 o'clock in the afternoon was dazzling. Squinting, I saw Cason leaning by the car at the hospital entrance. He came over, looked at me, and said, "Sorry." Cason hated apologies between us very much. He thought it was too distant. I shook my head. "It has nothing to do with you." Cason looked at me very seriously. "It does. I read the medical record. The emotional and fatigue reasons for your condition are both caused by me. I'm really sorry about the child. If it were the previous Cason, he should be holding me without saying a word. No, if it were the previous Cason, there wouldn't be this situation." I comforted him. "It doesn't matter. I didn't plan to have children originally. So infertility doesn't matter to me. After miscarriage, it caused great harm to the body. One of them is infertility. But for me, infertility is just the lightest one." Cason brought the property division to me again. I refused for 4 months and didn't want to end it like this with him. I always felt that he would recover. The doctor said it could take 6 months at the shortest and a lifetime at the longest. No one can say for sure about this memory loss. It depends on fate. He doesn't have me in his fate. Some people are like this. They can endure hardships together, but not enjoy happiness together. So looking at the agreement that Cason handed over again, I borrowed a pen from Alonso, decisively signed it, and accepted that half of the property division. He breathed a sigh of relief. His black and white pupils stared at me without a trace of impurity. For him, lovers have endless words to say. Only strangers are speechless. The way he looked at me but didn't know what to say made me helplessly look away, and take the initiative to solve his embarrassment. Cason, it's not troublesome here. You can go back and continue working. The afternoon meeting schedule is very full. Cason glanced at Alonso. Okay. He didn't hesitate at all and trusted Alonso completely. There was also no dissatisfaction. But before, when Cason saw me and Alonso standing under the same roof, he would be jealous and say, "The sense of crisis is so strong." Watching Cason's car leave, Alonso gently patted my wrist. "Let's go." I lowered my eyes. Okay. Sometimes I wonder, when Cason was struggling to survive in that car accident, I'm afraid he didn't know that he would hurt me so much. Right? If he had known in advance, I'm afraid he would rather let me be a widow. The previous Cason was like this to me. I am the moon he plucked. He wants to hold me up forever and regard me as his faith. When Cason just lost his memory, he flipped through his own diary. He didn't believe that he was a person who would write a diary. Especially a diary full of secret love. From high school to college. I chased Alonso. And he chased me. After reading the last line of the diary, he seemed to be moved and chose to accept psychological treatment. In his busy daily life, he added rehabilitation and external stimulation. He tried hard, but he really didn't love me. Before, as long as I frowned, he would drop everything to understand me. For him, all external things were to give me a better life. But that day, when I cried so miserably in front of his bed, he just pressed the back of his head inconspicuously and considerately took care of a strange sad woman with high quality. I knew that he didn't love me anymore. The psychologist talked to me privately and said that I was his thought of survival. The thought was so strong that it led to subconscious avoidance and emotional transfer. I felt sorry for him and took the initiative to move out of the wedding house. Only then could he catch his breath. Within 4 months, he got along with me in the way of a boss. Occasionally, he would enjoy our working time comfortably. He liked working with me because I was a person who was considerate in every way and very understanding of his requirements. But every time he thought about this tacit understanding that we had developed over many years of getting along, he would be troubled and feel sorry for me. This kind of apology suffocated me. My best friend accompanied me to live in the house I bought. I was glad that I had been poor and afraid for so long. After getting rich, the first thing I did was to buy a house in my own name. Although I had never lived there, it was my own home. Alonso was pulled over to make nutritious meals for me. My best friend read me novels about chasing wives to the crematorium and said viciously, "One day, Cason will regain his memory. When he thinks of you, he will be in agony. Then he will kneel downstairs of your house in the heavy rain, with a hoarse voice and red eyes, begging for your forgiveness." I couldn't help laughing. Impossible. My best friend pointed at the tablet. Novels are all written like this. Alonso poked his head out from the kitchen and mocked. "Lo Juan Hua. Read fewer novels." My best friend snorted. "Neither of you understand." I continued to drink the soup. If possible, I actually hope he doesn't regain his memory. The air froze for a moment. My best friend looked at me in disbelief. "What are you thinking? Cason is so sorry for you. Just let him pay some money? He must suffer for a lifetime." I was choked by the soup and laughed so hard that I couldn't stop coughing. Suffering on one side, being affectionate on the other side, enjoying the wealthy life on one side, and looking for a substitute to commemorate the white moonlight on the other side? My best friend helped me catch my breath and clicked her tongue. "Baby, you haven't read few novels either." I admit that when Cason just lost his memory, I survived by relying on countless novels about chasing wives to the crematorium. I also fantasized that he would regain his memory and be so remorseful that he would cry and beg me to get back together. But after fantasizing for a long time, one should be more realistic. Alonso poked his head out again. "Wo Juan Hua. What do you know? This is called always maintaining romance and vitality." My best friend got angry. "You're a double-standard dog. If you don't want your mouth, you can donate it to those in need. Even donating it to Cason is fine. Alonso tasted the saltness. Then Cason probably wouldn't be able to say anything nice. Adding a spoonful of salt, he added, "If he used my mouth." I was amused by the two of them. Alonso is so attentive not because he wants to recruit me as his wife, but because the aunt in the same position in their company has retired, and he wants me to take over. In Alonso's words, "You are young, in good health, of high quality, and have good abilities. Working for me for 10 years is no problem." He never said anything about being beautiful. My best friend complained, "I've only heard of young people taking over those who are beautiful. This is the first time I've seen young people taking over those who are in good health." He doesn't even know how to praise people. Alonso corrected. "This position is recruiting young people who are in good health. It has nothing to do with appearance." My best friend privately complained, "You still say he has a high EQ. I think he deserves to be single forever." When bickering with them, I almost forgot my troubles. But Cason's little girlfriend found me. My best friend wide and her eyes. "I've read a lot of novels. This is the first time I've seen it really happen." Alonso joined in. "Let me also see the world." In fact, it was just that the little girl added me on WeChat and asked me some questions about my previous project. In just a few words, she was crying. "I'm afraid Cason won't be satisfied." After thinking about it, "Only you know him best." When I saw this sentence, my foot went numb. It was because Alonso was pressing on it. He didn't notice. Alonso's arm was resting on my ankle, grabbing the remote control and changing channels. Fortunately, I didn't bet on football. Otherwise, I would go bankrupt tonight. I gently lifted my foot. But because my foot was numb and I lost sensation, it turned into kicking him. Alonso instinctively grabbed it. He was holding my ankle with one hand. The atmosphere instantly changed. For once, he couldn't say a word to break the awkwardness. The palm of his hand slowly became hot from being cool after just washing the dishes. I was also embarrassed to say that my foot was numb. So we were stuck like this. My best friend grabbed my phone and sent a voice message to Cason's little girlfriend. She sneered, "Madam, don't you have a work group?" Alonso instantly let go. I moved my ankle and regained sensation. My best friend got excited and almost dialed Cason. I stopped her. "He just got off work at this moment and should be resting. Cason only sleeps for a few hours a day. I don't have the heart to disturb him." My best friend lamented. "Where can you find such a good ex?" We thought this was just an episode. Until Cason's special assistant called me. His voice trembling as he said, "Cason had an accident on the way to the auction while being pestered by Miss Chen. Now he is in surgery." After listening, I said, "Oh." The special assistant pleaded, "Can you please come? If there's an accident, call the police and insurance company. If there's an emergency, call the doctor and lawyer. If there's someone needed to take care of him, call his relatives. What's the use of calling me?" While drinking soup, I realized from my sluggish mind due to a cold, Cason is not close to the Wei family. There is no one who can make decisions for him. He even moved out of his household registration. When he is critically ill, there is no one to sign the notice. I slowly drank the soup and asked in return, "Special Assistant Zhang, what's the use of me going? I'm not the person on his household registration. There is no legal relationship. What can I do when I go there? Cry?" Special Assistant Zhang paused for a while. Cason drove there alone. He didn't go to the auction venue. There was no accident. He drove and crashed into the guardrail of the Yingke Bridge. When Alonso heard me on the phone, he brought up the last dish. "Is it for compensation?" Special Assistant Zhang explained again. Cason saw the group photo in his study. There was an engagement ring. His girlfriend saw it and made a fuss. They had a big fight. If he can't forget the ring and insists on not throwing it away, then why not go find her? Why not have another accident and die to regain his memory? After Alonso listened, he opened his phone and muttered to himself. I have to make Wo Huan who quit online novels. What if she also becomes such an unintelligent person? Special Assistant Shang was speechless and hung up the phone. After the surgery, Cason didn't regain his memory. But this time, no one knew why he was so desperate, and seemed to be heading for suicide. If Special Assistant Shang hadn't come to deliver documents and found Miss Chen's attitude was not right and rescued Cason in time, he might really be dead. I went to see him. Sitting on the hospital bed, Wei Jin, looking confused, seemed unable to understand why I had come. I brought him a bowl of soup stewed by Alonso. Can you stop ruining your body? I chose my words carefully and tried to be as gentle as possible. Cason, you may not remember. After the college entrance examination, there was a period when your health was very poor. The Wei family just kicked you out. You studied desperately and almost died. I did odd jobs to earn tuition fees and cooked and made soup for you. After graduating and starting a business, your health was also very poor. I added to eggs to your meals every day, and secretly used bone soup and chicken soup to cook noodles for you in turns. At that time, it was very difficult to make money. It was really hard to take good care of your body. Looking at his gradually focused pupils, I slowly pushed the lunchbox over. You can't ruin it so easily. Cason's gaze followed my hand and looked at the soup. Is this stewed by you? I shook my head. Alonso stewed it for me. If he finds out, he will scold me. Cason blinked and smiled. I probably know why I love you. Because you took care of my body? No. Because you are very much like the moon. Hanging there. It makes people feel that they can't reach it. Reflected in the water. It makes people feel that they can reach it. But when reaching out from both ends, it turns out to be empty. Cason drank the soup and asked me. The moon can only be plucked once. Right? Not really. It's just that there is only one moon. Once plucked, there is no more. Cason never looked for me again. My best friend resented Alonso for hanging out with me all day. You are an older leftover man. You will become an old bachelor. Alonso was righteous. I will devote my whole life to scientific research. My best friend pointed at his recipe. Scientific research on recipes? Alonso was not discouraged and still indulged in being a nutritionist. The current situation is very comfortable. I didn't have a stroke of luck and encounter the plots in novels. What the male led regains his memory in 2 weeks or 2 months. Regains his memory by hitting his head in a car accident. Regains his memory by seeing the diary of the past. What after the male lead loses his memory? The female lead discovers that he actually cheated and transferred his love long ago. There is a white moonlight, and he only takes the female lead as a substitute. We are just living very normally. There is no dramatic and romantic reality. After the property division procedures were completed, Alonso sighed. You have become wealthy. Are you still willing to work for me? No. My answer remained unchanged. Alonso was not discouraged either. He continued to be obsessed with making soup and unknowingly worked for me for a long time for free. A year later, when my best friend was looking for our university badge, she found a ring in a corner. It was the engagement ring that Cason gave me. It was pressed under the graduation photo. The photo was taken by the tutor. There were only a few pairs of his students. Cason held my hand and smiled green and gentle. My best friend's originally high spirits dropped. Time is unpredictable. Originally, everyone thought that they could walk through life together. But before it even started, they went their separate ways. Before this, the tutor called me. The elderly man's voice was calm. What happened between you and Cason? He came to me and asked a lot about you. It has to be said that Cason is indeed a very serious person. He is even willing to revisit the past and search for memories. On the day of the miscarriage, after the dinner party ended, Cason and Miss Chen sent me to the parking lot. Cason personally drove. Shall we give you a ride? I subconsciously asked Miss Chen. Where is your home? After the three of us were simultaneously silent, I realized that he was asking me. Before, in Cason's words, we only included Cason and me. That day, my mood was at a low point. I refused Cason's kindness and drove home by myself. In the long seconds of the traffic light, in the comfortably temperatured decor seat, I had a miscarriage unexpectedly. The traffic police sent me to the nearest hospital. When notifying the family members, I took out my phone and finally called Wo Hua. From that time on, I was probably very tired. So I replied to the tutor. My tone was calm and teasing. Perhaps when people reach middle age, they want to recall the past. Cason read me bedtime stories. We nestled together and read books. I was so sleepy that I couldn't keep my eyes open. He insisted on hypnotizing me. There was a sentence that entered my ears in a half-awake and half-asleep state. The general meaning is that when you recall one thing, you will remember everything. For me, Cason is something that I got and then lost. For him, I am something that he has never obtained. On the day when I packed up the engagement ring, I deliberately chose a sunny day and sent it to Cason by mail. There was also a handwritten letter. The general meaning is that losing memory is also a good thing. During the time when I was with Cason, he didn't live a wonderful life. I don't know what went wrong. The letter was actually delivered to Cason after more than half a year. He called me. None of us spoke first. The sound of breathing was in our ears. There was a 5-minute-long silence. Cason said, I just want to try again. Why? I don't want to lose contact with you. Alonso was very angry. He accused. He also wants to poach you. You can't eat the grass that has already been eaten. Their company is too exploitative. We work from 9 to 6 without overtime. We have 2 days off on weekends, and paid annual leave. No team building. No dinners. No forced social check-ins. Wo Hua's chopsticks for rinsing mutton fell into the pot. She turned to look at me expressionlessly. If my cousin remains single forever, will he pester us and go crazy forever? Cason was bringing freshly bought vegetables and the Coke I wanted. He was changing shoes at the entrance. I approved Cason to become our meal companion. Because we are one person short for playing Mahjong. I don't know if Cason has regained his memory. He hasn't gone to see a psychologist again or had a re-examination. My best friend was very vigilant. What's your purpose? Cason washed the vegetables, rolled up his sleeves and picked up dishes and added Coke. Do what you want to do. Everything has a purpose. Alonso will also live a very tiring life. He used to be sarcastic to Alonso a lot. Alonso was drinking the soup base he mixed. The Wei family is probably down and out. They even have to mooch off our hot pot. Cason's expression remained unchanged. Dividends. Shares. It's indeed giving away all his wealth. Alonso. You exploit your employees to buy sports cars for you. Cason. I don't spend money recklessly. I'm not extravagant. Alonso. That's how it is when you are used to being poor. Cason always paid attention to whether there was enough food in my bowl. No wonder when I sat down, I had a vague feeling that this hot pot was very luxurious. After graduating, our first pot of gold was used to eat hot pot. For 100 or so yuan, we filled a table with dishes. The two of us hugged each other and cried bitterly around the induction cooker. After we have money, I will definitely not let you eat noodles anymore. Cason also bought oranges today. The hot pot was steaming. He handed me the orange. Wo Hua's eyes were complicated. Cason. She doesn't like oranges. Because oranges are cheap. And one orange has many segments. Eating one segment at a time can last for a long time. Alonso was so spicy that he drank a lot of water. After swallowing it, he finally caught his breath. What are you looking at? There are poor people's ways of eating and rich people's ways of eating. He picked up the hot pot noodles from the dish plate and asked me, have you had enough? Shall I cook some noodles for you? Unlike the 5 yuan bag of dried noodles, this hot pot noodle is in a bag. There is only one noodle cake in total. But the price is of a higher grade. I avoided Cason's gaze and nodded. Okay. Clearly, having eaten plain noodles for so many years, one should no longer want to eat noodles after having money. But I still like eating noodles. On my birthday, Alonso and my best friend were both absent and their phones couldn't be reached. While feeling depressed, I also didn't have the mood to go out and celebrate my birthday alone. I simply sat cross-legged in the living room and projected a movie with the dim outdoor light. Just as I was getting drowsy, there was a hesitant sound of footsteps outside the door. I immediately woke up and opened the surveillance of the doorbell. My best friend had entered her fingerprint into the door lock. And Alonso knew the password. These two people would only ask me to open the door if they went on a big shopping spree at the supermarket and couldn't free their hands. I thought there would be surprises in their hands outside the door. But I found it was Cason. After thinking for a while, I opened the door. He probably didn't expect me to open the door so quickly. It was silent for a moment. My gaze fell on the bag in his hand. It was a bag of hot pot noodles. 2 eggs. Scallions that obviously were given as a gift from the vegetable market. And a big bone. He said, "I'll cook you longevity noodles and then leave." I took a step back and let him in. The living room was not lit. After closing the door, our distance was somewhat ambiguous. After changing his shoes, he wanted to turn on the light. I subconsciously pressed his arm. "Don't turn it on." He was stunned for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Okay." Cason groped in the dark to start cooking in the kitchen. First, he blanched the big bone and simmered it slowly. Then he boiled the noodles in lard, prepared the soup base, fried 2 eggs, and sprinkled scallions. Then he placed it on the dining table. I sat here and watched his skillful movements. His back, which vaguely overlapped with the Cason who was excitedly learning to cook back then, made me unable to suppress the question in my heart after all. "Cason, you even remember all these things. How could you forget me?" The scallions in the bowl seemed to announce the fact that he still hadn't regained his memory. But his action of handing me an orange made me vaguely think that he had recovered. Cason silently picked out the scallions in the bowl one by one. The foreign language movie in the living room was still playing, and the bone soup in the kitchen was still steaming. Everything was so familiar. But everything was different again. After picking out the last scallion, he finally looked up. "Happy birthday." The door unlocked in an instant. Wo Huanhua pushed a cart of snacks with her left hand, and a cart of gifts with her right hand. She boldly jumped in. Alonso turned on the light. The sudden glare made me unable to see Cason's lip movements. Alonso had a stinky face and was carrying 2 large bags of fresh food. Saving on electricity bills is not enough to treat your eyes. With a snap, he turned off my movie. I blinked my sore eyes. After refocusing, Cason had already stood up and walked to the entrance. He said goodbye to me with a smile. "I won't disturb your celebration. The noodles are cooked. I'm leaving." Alonso was surprised. "Don't stay for a casual meal? Is that it for today?" Cason put on his coat and glanced at me again. "That's it." The door closed. He never broke his promise. The only time he broke his promise was about getting married to me. The vacation I applied for from the company had already expired. But I still hadn't received a notice of transfer. Logically speaking, there is a promotion assessment within 42 days. My best friend was doing my nails, and said casually while holding an emery board, "Even thinking with your toes. It's Cason who covered for you. He didn't come in person but just wants you to go back." Just as he said that day, Cason's pursuit of me ended on my birthday. He threw himself back into work and reappeared in various business conferences, restoring his arrogance. I heard that because Miss Chen was incompetent, she was fired by the personnel department before completing her internship. Everything else remained unchanged, including my workstation, which was still unoccupied. Alonso came back from work, bringing a lot of resentment. I thought the Wei family would be well behaved. I didn't expect them to be quite scheming. When I asked him, he refused to mention what happened today. Most likely. His attempt to poach someone failed again. The next day, I returned to the company with a handwritten resignation letter. Byron had just returned from an errand in a hurry. When she saw me, for the first time, she showed a relieved smile. "You still know to come back." I smiled and didn't say anything. I asked the front desk to call the president's office, patiently following the appointment process. I asked about Cason's schedule and asked if he could spare 3 minutes to see me. Cason had just finished a meeting. The sound of his conversation with his secretary came from the phone. After a while, a call was transferred to the landline in the president's office. "You know, I'm always available," he said softly, under the surprised gaze of the front desk. I said calmly, "Cason, official business should be handled officially." 3 months ago, to make Cason, who had just been discharged from the hospital, more relaxed, I brought him meals and assisted in docking with most of the cooperative enterprises. Although he didn't remember me, he still frowned and ate the meal. Until I received a call from the boss of T and Fang in front of him, and directly skipped the process of Cason attending the Chamber of Commerce. The contract was finalized online. Because that Chamber of Commerce was in the Southern Hemisphere, Cason's body couldn't adapt to the time difference yet. I still remember that Cason directly interrupted my call, looking at me with his unwavering eyes. When the secretary respectfully opened the door of the president's office and invited me in, Cason was staring at me, his face pale. I started with a joke to lighten the atmosphere. "Cason, today I bring a case that you definitely can't reject." I rarely smiled like this in front of him. After that incident, I only maintained my job duties in front of him. It could be said that I was extremely dedicated. Such a smile could only be seen on my face by Cason when I was with the Woe siblings. He was probably touched. Skipping my joke, he asked me, "Did you smile at me like this before?" I was a little confused and let out an ah. He raised his eyes and looked at me seriously. "Do you still like Cason?" I placed the resignation letter on his desk. As if reminiscing, a smile involuntarily spread across my eyes. "Yes." His eyes moved slightly, and subconsciously he took what I handed over. He would leave work 5 minutes early every day just to find out which barbecue restaurant I was at. But that day, he searched all the barbecue restaurants and finally caught me in a designer's studio. And I caught the engagement ring he had ordered for half a year. After handing in my resignation letter, I slowly sat down on the sofa beside. After the miscarriage, I didn't have the stamina to stand for a long time. Cason's gaze slowly moved from my eyes and eyebrows to the resignation letter in his hand. I was still immersed in the surprise of our passionate love back then. My voice unconsciously carried some nostalgia. Later, it was my turn to catch him. I found him secretly bargaining with the boss at a fruit stand. He still thought oranges were 3 on a caddy. But in fact, he hadn't bought them from roadside stores for a long time. After Cason became successful, he almost vindictively bought me the most expensive food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Everything was the best for me. So he firmly didn't believe that prices had risen rapidly. He seemed to understand my implication. The impulse from a moment ago had gradually cooled down. I raised my head but didn't look at him. Guess how much the wedding invitation sold for at the recycling station? He didn't speak and just looked at me. Just like the oranges Cason bought angrily that day. 10 yuan. I said it with a light smile. It was like sharing an interesting story with my lover. Since he lost his memory, I hadn't talked to him so much in one breath. Cason closed his eyes for a moment. The resignation letter in his hand was subconsciously clenched by him. And the edges were wrinkled. I sincerely looked at the wrinkled edge and said in a low voice, "Cason, my wedding cancellation was very embarrassing. Can you let me leave with dignity?" He agreed. Alonso expressed great regret. I thought he was going to cry and sing, "I've begged bitterly in front of the Buddha for thousands of years, in front of you." Lo Honhua laughed until she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. "You are so old-fashioned. How many years ago is that song?" I, who was drinking tonic soup silently, spoke up. That song is called Begging the Buddha. Wo Huanhua couldn't laugh anymore all of a sudden. Didn't you say you loved listening to Jade Chu the most back then? Alonso laughed loudly. He came over and gave me a high five. But I didn't make soup for you in vain. Alonso was very proud. Wo Huanhua. Otherwise, do you think how your brother would know this song? Because every time after I finished the exam papers Alonso had written in high school, I would be hit by the score difference and had nowhere to vent my pressure. I could only howl for a long time at a willow tree outside the yard. For you, I've become a werewolf. For you, I've become crazy. After so many years, I found out that the person himself had actually heard me singing to the willow tree. I couldn't help but feel my face flush. Thanks to Alonso never looking at the scores after finishing the exam papers, and preferring to pick up a large iron pot and learn to cook in the yard. He knew exactly about me correcting my own papers according to his perfect papers and then howling after that. For a moment, I even had a psychological burden when drinking soup. Just as I was hesitating on how to explain those fanatical behaviors back then, Alonso already understood and patted me. Don't have a burden and don't take it too seriously. There is a kind of person who won't have romantic feelings and won't fall in love and get married. His implied meaning was that he wouldn't have any burden and didn't need to care whether these attentions were based on ambiguity. His answer was a complete negation. When Special Assistant Zhang contacted me again, I had almost recovered. On the phone, he first confessed. Cason didn't let me contact you. But when I dismissed Miss Chen, I found that she had sent you a message. I still want to clarify some things. Special Assistant Zhang has always been a serious person. Every word he said was as solemn as if he were taking an oath. I couldn't help but choke on the hot pot and my voice was hoarse. Please speak. Miss Chen was a graduate that I found when Cason still couldn't regain his memory through external stimulation for months after losing his memory. He didn't want you to be exhausted by this anymore. The reward was an internship qualification at Ways. After he finished speaking, I took a sip of water and coughed a few times. Looking at Wo Huanhua's curious eyes, I said word by word. Special Assistant Zhang. Rest assured, I've cut off cleanly with Cason. The person on the other end was speechless and then said, take care. At this time, I completely lost hope of seeing Cason again. Because Cason is not that kind of person. The person who would easily deny our past in public just to make me stop being so lost because of my feelings. He is the person who has been chasing me since high school. Following my footprints one by one and finally walking ahead and taking my hand. A stubborn person who won't let go. He is the person who survived the car accident. Cason developed very well. Just like the blueprint he had drawn for me. He completely developed the Wei family into what he wanted. He led the enterprise to gradually disappear from the news. He gradually reduced the influence of himself and the enterprise on the public. Only knowing the market but not the Wei family. When Alonso told me, his face was somewhat serious. From time to time, he would secretly glance at me a few times, hesitating to speak. I packed my luggage alone and went to the north. When the lawyer found me, I was fishing by the coast. The wind made my face very dry. Above all, Omari, if there are no other questions, I suggest. The lawyer finished reading the will. I interrupted him. Where is the person? The lawyer paused. Mr. Wei wanted me to keep this secret. He said he was afraid that you would blame him for ruining the body nourished by bone soup. The fishing rod moved. I subconsciously reached out and touched the corner of my eye. Dry and warm. I knew that the person was gone. The matter was suppressed. Not many people knew about it. The risks and losses were minimized. Cason wanted me to take over a peaceful, prosperous era. I teased the lawyer. If you don't tell me, I won't get up today. According to the will, if I didn't cooperate fully, the lawyer couldn't get off work. No one doesn't love getting off work. He fell into the sea with a letter whose handwriting was blurred by water. There was a little wrinkle on the edge. The lawyer was helpless. I let out a long sigh. He couldn't legally reject my resignation letter. But the sea where he rests forever rejected it. Like him. But not like him. I patted the dust on my pants. No more fishing. Time to go to work. The lawyer helped me put away the fishing rod and then we left the sea together. Wo Huan Hua and Alonso still came often. The celebration banquet for my first project after taking over. The family reunion banquet on New Year's Day. One birthday banquet after another. It's just that the entrance hall never welcomed the person who changed into men's, shoe-size pink slippers and rushed over to rub against me and say, "Baby, guess which barbecue place I bought for you today?" On the day Byron got promoted as she wished. She toasted me many times and grinned widely and happily. Congratulations to both of us. Promotion, wealth, and the death of a husband. Outsiders only knew that Cason had left. Whether he went abroad or returned to the wealthy Wei family. The news was tightly suppressed by Alonso. So Byron's words actually turned out to be right. I raised my glass and toasted her back. Congratulations to both of us. I never looked at the sea again. Postscript. Whether a person has let go or not. You can tell. Just like a person who is liked can feel a fire around them. So Cason also knew that Amari had let go. For their past. For their just now. For their present. On the day he regained his memory. It was an ordinary and boring morning like any other. Unsweetened iced Americano. Piles of folders. And schedules for several meetings. Cason just suddenly felt that the coffee was very bitter. There were many files. And the meetings were spread too far. Those ordinary and tiny abnormalities were like an axe splitting heaven and earth. Piece by piece. Blow by blow. They opened up the chaos. It was as if he hadn't drunk bitter coffee for a long time. Hadn't dealt with so many files alone for a long time. And someone should have questioned the meeting arrangements. It was as if someone was missing. That person had appeared. Replacing coffee with hot milk and soy milk. Sorting and arranging the redundant files and returning them. And rejecting the meetings across the Pacific Ocean. And then that person disappeared again. The dazzling bright sun had just risen. Filling the empty and terrifyingly large bedroom. The room was filled with the early morning glow. But there was an emptiness and loneliness like waking up at 6 in the afternoon. Cason sat up and looked at his side. He intuitively knew that there was a milky yellow pillow missing here. He knew that he had given her up. He could forget everything. Forget the cold childhood. Forget the painful childhood. Forget the indifferent father and the hypocritical stepmother. But he couldn't forget one person alone. In his numb student days. That girl as bright and hot as a flame kept running forward. Wherever she passed. Everything burned. When he was young. His mother taught him not to delusion ally think that love is fair. His brief meetings with his father were only necessary due to his identity. He never asked for anything. What Cason should get. He will naturally get. What Cason shouldn't get. Not even a delusion will appear. So persistence won't bring results. But he saw the girl filling in the blanked papers again, and again. Slowly dissecting Alonso's problem-solving ideas bit by bit and breaking through one question after another. She chased after 1 or 2 points. Stacked up. It was a ranking. Alonso was the winner in life. Since birth. He had been far ahead. As the eldest son in the family. He was also the winner in learning. Since picking up a pen. He had never been behind others. The girl persisted like this. From first place to first place. But in front of Alonso. She still couldn't reach it. The bright moon hanging high in Cason's heart was just shining by borrowing the sun's light. But when had the moon ever hidden? The temperature on the back of the flame burned the rope, named numbness in Cason's heart. In his senior year of high school. The woman brought back by his father completely shattered the peaceful surface that his mother had maintained for many years. His mother lost power and didn't even take him. She just jumped into the sea, and let go. It was hard to say whether it was a melancholy death or the joy of finally being liberated. Cason only knew that he was a thorn in the flesh of his father, and that woman. Representing his father's past stains and an obstacle to their inheritance of the Wei family. They tried every means to mess up his admission qualification. forcing him to withdraw from this household registration, at the moment when he had nothing to be attached to in his life. That heavy rain fell like a dream. The girls' college entrance examination results came out. Together with Alonso's family, they went to the most expensive hotel to hold a banquet in all their glory. The luxurious car sped by, washing away the mud on the ground. Cason's clean school uniform was as muddy and mottled as his future. Through the car window, he could see the girl's satisfied smile. Once, he had almost been able to reach the temperature of the moon. But there are always turns in life. He was awakened by the girl's hurried footsteps and met her surprised eyes. "Cason, why are you here?" "The admission letter has been sent to the school." The rain that had been brutally tormenting him was so gentle to the girl. Even the raindrops showed favoritism, gently falling on his heart. They stirred up the illusory reflection layer by layer. The rain was chaotic. The wind was chaotic. And his heart was chaotic. After that banquet, Alonso seemingly casually told him, "When looking up at a person, there won't be the ambiguity. The people suitable for falling in love are only those who are climbing up at the same time, keeping pace and advancing side by side. They have the same experiences and will understand each other." But Cason avoided the girl's bright smile and never answered Alonso "I will." So he harbored a clumsy thought, and became the person who kept pace with her. Although her parents died early, she grew up surrounded by love. In her relationship with her, Cason was always the one being loved. He clumsily expressed his love but always received double the love. After a long time, Cason always had a vague feeling that he could love someone too. But when one side in love thinks like this, it's probably being loved more. Cason never understood why he was worthy of being loved like this and could withstand the difficulties from the Wei family. Facing the threat of the new mistress of the Wei family, he could still firmly smile and promise, "Auntie, I can't give him up." But whenever he gazed into Omari's eyes, he could always drown in them and forget everything. Perhaps love can overcome all difficulties. They warmed each other, shouldered the strange gazes, and shielded each other from the wind and rain. Cason could finally hold her hand and realize every longing from the past. Turn every future he had described into the road under his feet. But there are always turns in life. Just like that dreamlike heavy rain. It could arouse the pain of losing parents in Omari's heart. It could make his heart wave in chaos. It was all just a nutrient injected into his life by heaven with a time limit. When she went abroad to connect with work, Cason and the wolf one who planned a grand proposal. When imagining that this relationship would be legally recognized, and could become the most important person to sign in the critical moment of each other. That rain came as promised. On the way he was driving alone to pick up the ring and passing by the Wei family. He didn't know what kind of ending fate had arranged. At the moment of the collision, he suddenly sensed himself who had his admission qualification disrupted, and was expelled from home many years ago, losing all desire to survive. At the most hopeless moment, his heart was beating so noisily. He returned to chaos. Did she love him out of sympathy from that moment? Did her unreserved love for him, and her tolerance of his clumsy and inexperienced behavior contain the regret of losing her parents on a rainy day? Thinking carefully, the love he could give her was less than 1/10,000th of hers. He seemed to return to being 16 years old, numbly watching his body skillfully handle work. Then he classified all the shadows of Omari from the day they first met to the good morning kiss, when they parted into this chaos and became the 16-year-old Cason, playing the memories over and over again, trying to find the possibility of being loved. From the moment Omari secretly went back to school to get Alonso's test paper and pulled him up by the hand at the alley entrance. And they ran wildly along the riverbank where the fireworks were falling, shaking off the security guards behind them. When he threw himself into the sea of questions, and made eye contact with Omari who had also forgotten time and was locked in the classroom. There was a hint of a smile in her eyes when she looked at him. Omari was riding a bike, pedaling hard and messily. He subconsciously rolled down the car window but was hit on the head by the wrong question collection that was stuffed in through the car window. When he woke up in the evening and felt flustered and short of breath, when he saw the emptiness beside him. When he ran out of the bedroom, He found Omari was cooking soup for him according to the tutorial under the warm light. In every moment when he hit his self-esteem, he was loved sincerely and purely, just because they loved each other. So the dream was so beautiful that he couldn't accept that all this had become after waking up. He couldn't accept that he had forgotten that girl just because of his inferiority complex and avoiding the truth of being loved. Now he was inferior to the him at 16. Inferior to the him at 18. Inferior to the him before the accident who wanted to promise Samari a lifetime at dawn, when the fireworks all over the city burned out. Adding more scallions to the longevity noodles was just to use the time of picking out scallions to prolong their time. As if this could increase their possibility. But in the moment when the living room light was turned on and it was dazzling, Omari immediately looked at the Woe siblings who opened the door. His silent words subsided. At that moment, he understood that in the 4 months when he hid himself and argued with his inferiority complex, some people could use for months to let go. He was no longer him. Just like a Wo Huan who was crying and calling to scold him, saying, "Who are you exactly? Can you return Cason to AU?" How could Cason let her go home alone so embarrassingly? Just like Anso in the negotiation room. "Cason, it seems that you have inherited your father's good genes." He clearly knew how desperate his mother was after his father brought that woman home. But he still chose the most hurtful way to end their possibility. The badness engraved in his bones was passed down in the same vein. He had smoothed out the resignation letter folded by himself countless times. Omari said that the beginning of a letter often best reflects the relationship between people. If she were to write a letter to him, "Cason, if I were to write a letter to you, I must use the most mushy address and the most blushing signature. So that even if you receive a letter with no content, you can understand how much I love you." He lowered his eyes and looked at the letter in his hand. Still struggling. At that moment, he understood. Those 2 words Cason handwritten at the beginning of the letter were suddenly dazzling. The signature was her formal full name. Just as she said. A letter with no content. Just used to let him understand that he was no longer loved. Cason drank bitter coffee day after day. People who are new to the workplace will wonder why use coffee to refresh themselves. Stimulate the spirit with bitterness? Over time, they will understand the effect of caffeine. And in the end, Cason felt that it was bitterness that stimulated the spirit. In the office building, the lights of each department went out one after another as they got off work. In the end, only his light was left. At the moment when he took in the whole city, his spine trembled and clamored with longing. But in 4 months, the person who loved him wholeheartedly endured more than just longing. It was the pain of remembering and cherishing every time it rained. It was the loneliness of feeling lost every time he woke up. It was the bitterness that made it hard to breathe every time he saw a loving couple. Time couldn't be let go. After so many days and nights, he still couldn't let go. So how lonely was she before the moment she let go? Love can overcome all difficulties. But to love, it can't be only one person loving. People who keep pace are suitable for falling in love, not suitable for staying together. On her birthday, it took 1 minute to pick out the scallions. The last look at her took 30 seconds. 1 minute was too long. 30 seconds was too short. 4 months for her to let go was too long.